Traveling changes a man, you know.
So, we are rolling into another episode of the Traveling Podcast, and today we have a very special guest, one of my dear friends, Kristina.
Oh, hello.
And Kristina, she's going to tell us about, tell us a little bit about herself, her experience traveling, where she's been to. I'm sure our audience will gather eventually, that she's not from America.
And so that's Zac Sutherland introducing. This is Tyler Gooden coming in on the other side. Kristina is in Russia, and Zac and I are in the United States. So this is going to be a cross-cultural extravaganza.
Tell us, Kristina, where are you from? And,
how old are you? How much money do you make?
Yeah.
I live in Russia, but I spent, 5 years living in China. I'm a psychologist. When I lived in China, I used to be a teacher, communicational skills and all this kind of stuff that is necessary in now modern life to integrate in society and all this kind of stuff.
You are actually our first guest on the podcast. You're a number of different things. You're our first guest. You are our first female guest. And you're our first guest not from America. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of female travelers out there who are interested in traveling solo. Mm-hmm. Kind of explain how you got to China and what are safety concerns for the female audience members who are interested in traveling solo.
I was bored of Russia and I felt like I need some change. And I found an opportunity to move to China, and that's what I did. It was pretty easy. Actually, I expected that it will be something similar to Thailand, so I didn't have realistic expectations. So when I got to China, I realized that it's an absolutely different story. I had a very stressful first experience being there because I wasn't hired by the company that processed my visa. And I was actually left nowhere, literally nowhere. My luck was that the agent that helped me to get to China was in contact with me, and he literally found a new job pretty quickly for me. But it was a national holiday then, and I was absolutely alone in a new country, knowing nobody, not having friends or whoever. Spending Chinese 3 days holidays in October. I don't remember what exactly holiday it is. It was pretty stressful for me, but I don't really believe in some magical stuff, but I was fortunate enough to meet very kind people. So I met a girl who turned out to be my friend, and she really helped me a lot. She could speak English, luckily. She spent those days with me. She literally integrated me into the place where I arrived in Shanghai, but I was supposed to be placed in a different city, and I met her in that city. It is called Hefei. And she showed me around. She introduced me to her friends. She invited me to her place. We tried some local food. It was a very interesting experience, and my stress was kind of compensated with all these new exciting experiences, meeting new people and integrating into new culture. So it was really helpful. I can imagine if I just stayed on my own, I would feel very uncomfortable because the place where I went, people there mostly did not speak English. So if saying something about how to get to a foreign country for a solo girl, because it was not necessarily traveling for me, it was just living and traveling. I was supposed to be met by some local people that was making my social circle and I wasn't completely alone. But what I want to say that China is super safe. It's spoiling safe, I would say. It's ridiculously safe sometimes, I think. So when I was used to come back to Russia, I was just a little bit nervous, being just in a bus, sensing some tension a bit,
Yeah, it's safer than the U.S. too.
I think we don't know much because there's a lot of censorship and stuff going on. There's some stuff that they hide from us, but overall, people seem to be so naive and it seems to be like really, really safe. Like taking a taxi for me, a solo girl at night, was almost never a problem. It was just only one case when it was actually a problem for me.
Yeah. So you took the plunge. You went to China, and it eventually turned out really good because you did meet someone that helped you along the way. And then once you stayed in China for 5 years, so that's a long period of time.
And I moved around, yes.
And you moved around. Tell us about what was it like once you got to China and developing social contacts, friends. What was it like as far as well, let me just get to it. What was the dating scene like, Kristina? Because it's a unique, I know that it's a unique situation in China, and you must know.
So you're interested only in dating thing, like not in general, like meeting and making friends?
Well, not only in dating, but in general,
dating first.
Dating is always the it's always the easiest one to find a story in, you know.
Yeah,
and especially I think what's exciting. I think what's interesting that Zac and I discussed earlier that makes this interesting for us is, well, there's a couple of things. One, other than the fact that Zac just loves to go on dates, is that we would find it interesting from a woman's perspective, some of the things that we have already discussed about dating different cultures and what it's like for us. And also I think that Zac and I tend to possibly romanticize our experiences a bit more than people within that country probably would, which I think is natural. I think it's natural to sort of like, it's more interesting or unique. It's exciting to date somebody. So for example, like if Zac was to date a Russian, or I've dated Ukrainians, I've dated Russians as well. Like we tend to see things in a heightened sense, and sometimes we don't see the other side of the coin. We did discuss this a little bit in one episode about dating Russians. Is like there's a good side and there was a bad side to it, but a lot of it is sort of idealizing things that we saw. So I think it's really interesting for us to kind of hear your perspective, just because naturally you're going to have a unique one that's going to be a little bit different than ours, because you're one. First of all, you're a woman. Second of all, you're a Russian woman, and we're talking about dating Russian women. So what's it like?
I'm very selective Russian woman.
That's one of the things. So this is exactly where I think the heart of Zac's question is like we're trying to get a sense of like, what was it like for you? What is your experience dating Russians? What's your experience dating outside of your country? And that way maybe we would be able to get into it a bit, because then we would have an input as well on some of those things.
Okay, a little note. I hope Russians not going to listen to your podcast, because I don't date Russians. There is nothing to refer to.
But see, now there's the starting point right there. Why don't you date Russians?
Oh my God, Zac, do you remember how I told you that I'm going to have like this? I'm going to release the book, like all this, like my date fails or something like that.
Because I think it was a great idea.
Now you get to preempt your book a bit and sort of like preface it so people out there can be like, oh, I got to read that book.
Oh my God. So the question was why I don't date. I'm gonna do it brief because it's not really interesting.
Okay.
Because we're different people apparently with Russian men. I realized it even more after being abroad for quite a while. There is like this stigma still, and about the female role in relationship. I guess if you used to date Russian women,
right? And
maybe they told you about that, like this patriarchy and all these kind of roles in relationship and family. It is changing now, but it's not changing in the right dynamic, in my opinion. So there is no respect, I feel. There is no respect. There is a lot of sexism and ageism and all this kind of stuff, like that people label people in different levels and criterias, and there's certainly decent guys living here, but most of them they just left the country and moved to another country, I'm pretty sure.
The interesting people always leave their countries.
And this is a shame.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Right? Because it's such a cultural loss, I think. But I mean, like, what are you gonna do?
So who do you date?
At the very beginning, I never dated a Chinese man. I did have a crush on a Chinese guy. It used to be my yoga teacher, which wasn't a typical Chinese guy. He was very spiritual, very, very not Chinese, I would say. He was like, I mean, his mentality was Chinese, but he was not behaving like a Chinese person.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I had a very interesting story with Chinese man stalking me. He came to my yoga class, but
Really?
It was a different class. Yes, and he didn't speak. It's kind of cool when man is trying to fight for you, but not when you lie to this man. Like, and
Not when he's standing outside your
point.
window watching you do your homework.
No, he came to the
that's not
class. He
charming at
literally
all.
joined the class, and he started doing yoga. And I'm like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, like, seriously. Yeah, it was unpleasant.
That's not
I'm
nice.
very territorial, and I don't like when people get into my space when I do not. Like boundaries very important to me. Interesting thing about China, people do not sense boundaries. Not physical boundaries, not mental, emotional, intellectual. They just don't sense boundaries. This is like the common thing. I don't judge. Like, some people, they don't learn these things, and they just don't know what it is. Like we referred before, right? The questions are kind of like, oh, are you married? What is your job? How much money do you make? I mean, it's not a joke. They literally can ask you that, like, knowing you like 3 minutes, you know?
Right.
They don't sense boundaries.
Interesting. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that's such a cultural phenomenon? Do you think it has anything to do with their reemergence having more power, and they don't, like, of course their family is important to them. Like, what do you do? They have a lot of pressure to start families. They have a lot of pressure on. I think it seems to me there's so much about pressure, whereas it's interesting you chose the word boundaries. Like, I've found that very interesting about different cultures, like relationships, like dating. Like, I've noticed that in some cultures there is no sense of boundary, and so it's really interesting to me that you chose to use that word. But I was just wondering, why do you think that they have no problem asking you, like how much do you make? Like, they get right to business. It's like they go straight to. I mean, I've dated some different cultures where they do this. Like, you get straight into business. It's like, okay, what is the thing? Am I going to get the thing that I want? Okay, I'm not getting that. Okay, I'm moving on. And I always thought it was like a woman thing, but maybe it doesn't have anything to do with like a woman asking me these questions if you're having the same experience.
It's hard to tell. I mean, like, I assume it's just like normal. Like, certain cultures have like something that is common. Like, you know, for example, in my culture, it's not common to open up quickly,
right?
Which is why we are known as a very cold nation, which is not truth, because we just like open up slowly, layer by layer. But for example, in your culture, you're very smiley and open, but it's like a facade. Like, you know, it's not necessarily how you feel or what you want to do, but there's certain manners. Like, you know, this is the difference, the cultural difference. It just exists. It's a manner. So there is apparently a lack of manners, I would say. So, like, you know, the people, they just do not know that it's not acceptable to ask certain things. That's all.
Interesting.
So it's not like they're rude; they just don't know that it's rude.
There must be something in the cultural history that I think that cultural histories have a lot to do with things. Like, for example, the British sort of style of being polite and these things that comes from a historical moment where, you know, during the monarchy years, there was all these sort of rigid sort of rules that contributed to politeness. That politeness like transformed into something else, and then these things they come from like almost like streams into rivers. They come from different things. So our cultural manners, as you say, it's influenced by the past, by the way our culture was built. So it is very interesting how these different cultures have different sensibilities about things. I noticed that about the Chinese in my experience with Chinese as well. And a lot of Asia, not all Asia, but a lot of Asian customs or cultures are like that, where it's kind of like there's not a sense of personal space. Go ahead, Zach.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, just in general, if you've been to China and once, like, 1 billion people is just a number to folks who have not been to China. Once you get to China and you realize the lack of space, why they build these huge skyscrapers and everybody's living on the something floor, you know.
Well, but they
You know.
have ghost cities at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
they do have space.
Yeah.
They do.
Goes back a long way, I think. I read some article one time about rice production and how the fact that they were able to produce rice so much would exponentially grow their country in terms of prosperity. But the rice production could be done in a small space in a very efficient way, and it's hard to articulate how that relates to their sense of space, but because of the growth of rice and on those rice plantations, how they were able to make things in an efficient way, and that sort of turned into using space more efficiently, not needing necessarily wide open spaces like we have in America. I mean, yes, there are ghost cities, but still, I mean, most cities in China are very crowded. I think Hong Kong might be the most per capita, the most people in one small area.
Hong Kong is not China, Zach.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that. We can get into that in another one. That's a whole different conversation. But that's my general impression of it.
Interesting perspective. Actually, I just got an idea because I went to India and I've noticed this thing there as well. And I think maybe it also has to do like overall, if India is kind of Asia too, comparing all Asian cultures, right? They used to have like tribal living, right? And big families.
That's right.
And these people kind of get together.
That's right.
I mean, like we used to have big families, but not that big.
Yeah.
And now we live in a world with a lot of like singlehood and lonely.
Yeah. India is the perfect example, I think. I think China is one example. There's something more undefinable for me about what we're trying to say, but India is a perfect example. Like Indian cultures, I mean, there's different. I mean, India is full of languages and different customs and things, but my experience with Indian people is it is very much about, like, it's almost like the family unit is, and it's not even just that it's a family, it's they look out for each other. I think there is corruption in the way they do things as well, but I've noticed that they treat their community, let me put it that way, their community is a unit, and they do things based on that, and that's how they've managed to thrive. So that's a survival mechanism. I mean, the Patel family is a well-known last name, but they own almost all the hotels in the United States precisely for this reason. This is how they manage to survive and thrive. So that, I think India is the perfect example of this idea that's more like a communal sort of survival mechanism that also leads to like personal space issues, because other people are like, well, we have you have to think about in the United States, it was, I mean, we could, we'll stay away from the conversation of colonialization, but just that the fact that there was so much space available to the first settlers in the United States. That's why Americans are loud. We have a lot of space to speak loud.
Yeah, interesting. Well, with China, the same story. Like they're very family oriented, and they have a lot of pressure too. Like girls in 23, they say, "I'm old. I need husband."
You're a single dog. If you're single, they call you a single dog in China.
Well, I still have Chinese female friends who are single in their 30 plus. I mean, like, I don't know how they survive in their culture, because it is very tough. I mean, like, it's tough in my culture.
Is there more women than men? Is that part of the dynamic because of the single child policy?
There are more men than women.
There's more men. There's more men. There's a certain generation born in maybe the 80s or 90s that you wanted to have a male baby. And so
they used to kill girls. They used to kill girls.
That's right.
They would not say to anyone.
I thought you guys said China was a safe place for women.
It's also a complex place.
Yeah,
exactly.
I said that before too. It's very complex.
Exactly.
Let's don't scare anyone.
China is definitely not just like one thing,
That's a great point.
Yeah, so it's that did create a problem, the whole like having male children, because then there are all these like, there's no females for these guys to date, and so you're like, It's like for women, I guess that's good because like, oh, we get to choose so many. But yeah, so then they imported foreigners. That's actually how I went to China. You know, they were recruiting single guys, and they're like, oh, this one looks good.
Yeah.
No,
I think you're more an expert about this, like, just than me, Zach, if talking about dating in China.
Can you just tell like one story?
Tell us your dating history, Christina. Zach just wants to know your whole dating history.
Well, I want to get to the funny stuff because Christina has. Well, no, I wanted you to maybe elaborate on just one funny story because I remember laughing so much when you would tell these just funny stories about. If
Which
you
one?
could just
Zach, kick us off with an example that.
Yeah. What story? Do you remember a specific story? Because I cannot recall.
No, it was a guy. You told me one time about this guy. Maybe he was from Turkey or something like that. He found you on Instagram, then he followed you, then he messaged you, or maybe it was one of the dating apps. And he would send all these chauvinistic messages, sort of like I'm the man, the macho man, and then. You blocked him, but then he somehow what he did, he found you from a different number, and he said, and then he got friends with you from a different number, and then he just did that just so he could say, now I block you. Like, and then he blocked you. Like the whole it's so petty. It's like a new. It's another level of petty.
But is that a culture? I mean, because I have had some petty situations too, and I'm not sure I can blame it on a culture. Dating is a mess now. I don't care where you're from. It is a mess.
Oh, it's totally a mess. Yeah.
It was a message. You woman, don't block me. I'm a man. I block you. You sound sexism over there. I remember the story. I don't remember the nationality of a person, and I don't really.
It's interesting you go about the sexism thing because there's the other side of the coin, which is over here the roles are starting to become too indistinguishable from one another, and I think it's frustrating for a lot of people. It gets confusing. The men and women relationships. Can I do this? Can I do that? Like, am I offending you? Like, where's my role? Where's your role? Why are you doing the thing that the other role used to do? There's a lot of weird like sort of conditioning happening at least in the United States, but I think in a lot of the West. And Zach and I were talking about this. One of the things that at least I appreciate about dating Slavic women, but mostly like the more Eastern Slavic women, like Ukrainian or Russian, was the sense of roles. You're a man, I'm a woman. There's this sort of definition between the two roles, and it actually built the attraction. I felt like there was an attraction being built. I was able to play my part, and she was able to play her part more. And I don't think that like that's the whole story though, because I did see the expectations were really high on me at the same time. It was like there was a constant sort of like subtle demand. Like it was a very subtle demand, but it was constant. It was like, oh, do I ever get a break? You know, can I ever like just be like somewhat neutral in this relationship? Do I always have to play a part? And I think somewhere in the middle of these two poles is the balance that I think that we're all looking for probably.
Oh, well, yeah, that's why you need to communicate, I guess. So that's the only way to resolve it.
And that's hard when you don't speak the other person's language. So maybe that was my problem.
She didn't speak English then?
No, I'm joking because the communication problems that you automatically have by dating somebody that speaks a foreign language.
In more Eastern countries, a lot of them, they at least kind of appreciate the traditions a little bit more. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing just to realize that male and female are different and they care about different things. But somehow in the West, we've just
it's become a mess, and it's confusing and it's frustrating because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be enjoying each other's company. It seems like there's so much wool has been put in front of people's eyes about the way they're supposed to feel or the way they're supposed to be because they don't have those traditions backing them up. Whereas places like in the eastern parts of the world, or even anywhere, like a lot of conservative countries are like that. They already have a kind of buffer. They already have a kind of foundation that they're working from. And when you don't have that foundation of meaning, anything goes. It just starts to get kind of nonsensical at some point. But I'd like to lead us into a funny word game. So the game is we're going to name an animal, and I'm going to name a few animals, and each one of the animals we're gonna say what that animal says in our language. So I'm going to start it off. In English, the pig says oink oink. What does the pig say in Russian?
Хрю-хрю.
Wow.
Хрю.
How you spell that, Christina? Is that with the X?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Chr.
Хрю-хрю.
Okay. Chr. I'm just trying to picture it in Russian. But
H-R-U.
A what?
H-R-U.
H-R-U.
Oh, I think that's similar in Czech. I think Czech is hru.
Okay, yeah.
I think.
I got it now.
Okay, so does anybody know that one in Chinese? Probably not. We're not that
no.
good at Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to get a Chinese person on here. So let me ask you this one. What does a frog say? In English, it's ribbit, ribbit.
Kwa kwa.
Kwa kwa. I thought that was a duck.
Kwa. Huh.
I think kwa kwa is
No.
very common in European languages, actually. Is it kwa kwa? Why did we say ribbit, ribbit? That is such a weird thing.
I have
Frogs
no idea.
do
It
not
kinda
say
sounds
ribbit.
like-
Nah, it goes.
They don't
it goes
even
kwa
say
kwa. What kind of frogs are you guys listening to over here? And
Maybe they have different frogs in Russia that go kwa
Just
kwa.
different hearing of the sound.
Yeah.
okay, all right. Let's get to the next one. This one's the most like
Challenging.
generic one. Cow. What does a cow say? I think we all have the same sound for a cow. What does a cow
Yeah.
say in Russian?
Moo.
Moo. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think moo is universal.
Yeah.
I think even
all
Universal.
cows speak the same language.
yeah, you cannot get that one screwed up with your ear. You cannot misinterpret that.
It's pretty. All cows do
it is.
pretty much go moo.
That's it. They do not say anything else. Yeah.
Cats too. Cats too.
Meow.
And dogs.
What does a cow?
No?
What does a cat say? What does a cat say in
Meow.
Russian? Meow.
Meow.
Right. Okay. So okay. Here is my favorite one because nobody's example of this one sounds like anybody else's, and I love this one because the English one, or at least the American one, is so stupid. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to ask you, what does a rooster say in Russian?
Кукареку.
Kukuriku?
Yeah, I think that one's common. That one sounds familiar to me. Say it one more time.
Кукареку.
Kukariku.
That's
Yes.
But that's more
That's
similar than I
correct.
thought. Do you know what our rooster says? An
Oh
English
yeah.
rooster?
Cock-a-doodle-doo. Whatever they say.
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
Something.
What? No rooster says that.
Something.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one. They one time, the reason why I wanted to play this game was one time when I was in Italy, I sat around a table with about 7 different languages, and we just sat there all night laughing at each other's different animal sounds because we all thought each one was crazy. Like everybody's like, they do not say that. They say cock-a-doodle-doo. What is wrong with you? Oink oink. You know, it's a big argument.
I wish I could remember the one they said in Finland for some animal, because it was really weird. I was like, they don't say that.
Yeah.
What are these Finnish?
What about a
whatever.
crocodile? What does a crocodile say?
I have no idea.
I don't
Do
think they
even
say anything.
speak?
What about a fish? What does a fish say in Russian?
Also, they don't.
What? Your fish don't say
They don't.
anything? Ours say
No.
blip blip. Actually, we don't have. That was a joke. That was a bad joke.
That could be the one.
Okay, that's my animal sound game.
That was fun. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing we wanted to do was the tongue twister.
I guess we're pretty much at the end of the podcast.
I think we pretty much covered it. We'll get into Christina's personal life more in the next episode.
Let's wrap up this podcast with our world famous tongue twisters from different languages. And this time, because we have someone that speaks a native language other than our own, we're going to let Kristina do the honors of telling us a tongue twister in a language of her choice, hopefully Russian. Okay, so Give us a tongue. I hear you typing on your keyboard. Are you typing on your keyboard looking for a tongue twister?
Yeah.
I thought you would know one right off the top of your head. All right, that's fine. Just give us one. You can look on Google.
But I got one. We're not looking at it yet.
Okay, give it to us.
Кукушка, кукушонка, купила капюшон, как он в капюшоне смешон.
Cuckoo, cock-a-doodle-doo?
Can you say it again slowly?
Кукушка.
Kukushka? Kukushka?
Yes, it's the name of a bird. I don't even know it in English. Кукушонку. It's a baby bird.
Kushu konkush kush.
Кукушка. Let's do another one. The easy.
Okay.
Карл у Клары украл рекламу, а Клара у Карла украла бюджет.
You said it was going to be easy, but I know you said something about either a king or a queen in there somewhere. The Kral. Am I right?
No, it's
No?
a name. Carl.
Oh, Carl.
Clara.
Carl and Clara. Okay.
Карл у Клары украл рекламу.
Reclama is a commercial,
Yeah,
a business.
the ad. Carl stole the ad from Clara. And Clara stole the budget from Carl.
Clara
Ah.
stole the budget from Carl?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a Russian phrase for sure. You guys over there are stealing each other's budgets and commercials.
Карл у Клары украл рекламу, а Клара у Карла украла бюджет.
Well, thanks for coming on our podcast, Kristina. We appreciate it.
Welcome.
And
Thank you. It was fun.
thanks for all those who are listening. Please send us more tongue twisters or idioms.
Спасибо.
До свидания, Kristina. Спокойной ночи.
До свидания.
До свидания.
Traveling changes a man, you know. For better or worse, who could say? But when I die, don't you tell them I went out this way. Tell them I said something. Yeah, tell them I said something great.